Memory plays a central role in how we think about ourselves and who we are. And so we fear memory loss and worry when a name or fact doesn't come as easily as it once did. But even before such slippage begins, is memory really the reliable source we like to think it is? Dr. Julia Shaw's new book is called The Memory Illusion: Why You May Not Be Who You Think You Are. And it offers a fascinating view of the inner workings of it all, and she joins us now for more. Nice to have you here at TVO tonight.
Great to be here. Okay,
the last chapter of your book starts with this sentence: "If I have done my job, your memory should now seem hopelessly fragile, impossibly inaccurate." This will not come as news to anybody who's over the age of 50, which includes your humble host here. Why is it important for us to be aware of how unreliable our memories can be?
So one of the big things that I like to highlight is the normalcy of building pieces of fiction into the way we remember. So essentially our personal narrative, our life story, is partly accurate in terms of how we experienced it, but there's also really big pieces of fiction throughout. So what I really want to show is that misremembering is normal, and that while this can be a scary thing, that you think, wow, I should be able to remember something, or should be able to remember this fact, or this person, or this name, really, our memories are inherently unreliable, but that's okay because it opens up our brains to being capable of other wonderful things.
Why do we misremember? And is that a real word, misremembering?
Misremembering is a real word.
I remember Roger Clemens using that word when he was testifying about steroids in front of Congress, and he said, well, my friend Andy Pettit of the Yankees misremembers. And I thought, that sounds weird, but it's a real word.
It's a real word, and another word that is often used is a false memory.
Yeah.
So false memory can be a small detail that you get wrong, or an entire event that never happened. So thinking you left the keys by the door, going to look for them, they're not there, being sure, I know I put them there, that's a small false memory.
Do we know why that happens?
Yeah, we do know why that happens. So the reason that our memories are creative and convince us that things happened that didn't is because memory is association. So in the brain, a memory is a network of cells, and these cells can essentially, the connections can be severed, and they can be reconnected. And so what's happening when we're misremembering or when we have a false memory is that we're connecting those dots in ways that are incorrect. And this is generally good because that flexibility in the brain is also what allows us to connect new concepts with one another. For example, when we are being creative, when we're problem solving, when we're learning. So this is generally a good thing, but the byproduct is that sometimes we think things happened that didn't.
So when I forget my keys, I shouldn't beat myself up too much, because actually the flip side of that is my head is open for other things.
Exactly.
Other more positive things.
Exactly.
Now, all right, here's a potentially negative side about it. Implanting memories. This is a different thing. What is that?
So implanting memories is when either we do it to ourselves or other people do it to us, and they convince us that we did things that didn't happen. And so in particular, this often happens over family gatherings. So while I'm a criminal psychologist and my application is usually to the criminal justice system, which I'm sure we'll get to, the normalcy of this kind of situation is striking, where you're at the dinner table, you're talking to your aunt, you're talking to maybe your children, and you're recalling an event that you all experienced together, and you see that there's strikingly different versions of what you assume can only be one reality. And what's happening in those situations is that by the end of it, often, maybe sometimes after some disagreement and dispute, right, some fighting, no, my version's the right one.
And some alcohol.
And some alcohol. What often happens is that you end up at the end sort of agreeing on a version. And so what you've done is you've actually potentially taken over other people's details that you didn't actually originally process, and you've given them some of yours. And so you end up with this sort of combined memory.
Which may or may not be true.
Which may or may not be true, and that's exactly it, is that they've potentially implanted false memories because their memory details might be inaccurate.
Do you know why some people might be more susceptible to that than others?
So everyone is susceptible to this, just to be clear. Even the people with the most amazing autobiographical memories in the world, called highly superior autobiographical memory individuals, HSAMs, we call them, even they are prone to false memory distortions for significant things. But the reason that this is important for, for everybody and for vulnerable people as well, is that some people do, of course, open themselves up to being more prone to making these false memories because they're more compliant, because they have issues with maybe differentiating fact from fiction, So people with mental illness, and of course things with like dementia and Alzheimer's, where people start to also connect dots in ways that make sense because they're missing pieces. And so they start to what's called confabulate. They fill in the blanks by making stuff up.
This, I mean, let's go full circle from what you just said a moment ago, which
Yeah.
is given your criminology background. This obviously has huge implications, you know, in the justice system, for trials, for everything like that. How problematic is this, that false memory is an issue?
I mean, it essentially calls into question
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it calls into question our personal reality, but it also calls into question every eyewitness, every victim, and every defendant statement, which is troubling. But it's also just acknowledging the reality of it. I mean, that's just how memory works, and we need to be aware of it, and we need to guard against potentially leading people down paths towards false confessions and witness statements that are incorrect.
Would you be of the view then that there are plenty of people in prison in this country today, well, all over the world today, who ought not to be there because of false memory, implanted memory, faulty memory, all of that?
I know that there are people
know it.
all around the world in prison because of faulty eyewitness statements where people think that they remember things that didn't happen, faulty victim statements, and faulty confessions. I mean, there's some popular TV series that focus on these kinds of things that really expose, look, it's police processes, police questioning can lead people to themselves believe that they did terrible things that they didn't.
Let me pick up on this because I think it's probably 30 years already, maybe not quite. The granddaddy of all of these examples took place quarter century ago. There was some, maybe it was confabulation, who knows, allegations of a sexual satanic cult. You do, I mean, you've got a whole chapter in the book on it. Sexual abuse of children, satanic cult, all of this. Do me a favor, take 30 seconds, remind everybody what the story was and how it relates to memory manipulation.
So there are a number of cases during what was called the Satanic Panic, where people were generally accusing the individuals running daycares or running nurseries or running schools, or potentially even accusing their parents of horrific sexual abuse, where there was satanic worshiping and there was sort of cult-like behavior. And quite often these allegations involved sort of being impregnated and having babies cut out and as children. Yeah. And having just incredibly visceral things happen and describing them. And this is what also makes these stories often compelling when you first hear them, is that people who think that they've experienced these satanic situations that later turn out not to be true, they will tell these stories with such emotion and such detail and such vividness that you can't help but be convinced that this must have happened, because how else could you remember it this way? And what the Satanic Panic taught us, especially in the 90s, is that therapists and overly eager social workers can essentially convince individuals who they suspect might have been the victims of sexual abuse, benevolent people, so people who want the best for the people they're talking to, but they can accidentally implant false memories of trauma.
Particularly problematic if there are children involved, because in essence, you're putting thoughts in a child's mind that may never have been there.
Yeah, particularly problematic for children, but of course this can also be in historic cases where adults seek therapy now and potentially are told by a therapist or social worker again that they must have been abused. That's why they now have depression or anxiety or whatever.
You make the parallel to it's the Salem witch trials of the 17th century, right? You make that parallel in the book.
Yeah, I do.
There are echoes of that, aren't there, in that?
Yeah, where you're digging for things and you've got tunnel vision, and essentially there's no way that you feel will disprove your assumption.
What's your view on the suppressed memory, which we hear a lot about?
Repressed,
right.
Yeah. Repressed memories are a mainstay, unfortunately, in our social consciousness. Unfortunately, they are not evidence-based or empirically sound. So repressed memories, the assumption is that some memories can be pushed into our subconscious by our conscious mind, which is the idea that sort of our brain can hide stuff from us. So if you have a really traumatic event, the assumption is that that can be hidden from you because it's so damaging that your mind can't deal with it actively.
On the face of it, that sounds reasonable.
Sounds reasonable, mainly because we've heard it so many times,
Okay.
And because it's referenced so often in pop culture. Unfortunately, it has no substance, and it came from Freud. So I mean, Freud, who we've also all heard of, Sigmund Freud, who was huge, obviously, in the development of the field of psychology, but wasn't a scientist. I mean, he was denied the Nobel Prize because his work was quote, of no scientific value. I mean, he wasn't a scientist. He never claimed he was really a scientist. And so his theories were half-baked. And this one was unfortunately one that ended up doing a lot of damage.
Did I just hear you say Sigmund Freud's theories were half-baked?
Yeah.
You did say that.
I did say that.
That must be where I heard it.
Yeah.
He's pretty, he's pretty foundational for so many people, though, today.
Foundational, but a lot of his stuff is wrong. He also fabricated stuff. He also did therapy on his own dog. I mean, he did a lot. I have a Scientific American column, and I wrote a post, all the things I hate about Sigmund Freud. So like 9 things I hate about Sigmund Freud.
That sounds very listicle-like.
It is very
9
listicle.
things I hate
it
about
is very
Sigmund Freud.
listicle. Yeah.
You have no doubt in your travels heard people say, I can remember my own birth. Is that possible?
No. So memories before the age of 2.5 are impossible. Physiologically impossible. And by memories, I mean autobiographical memories. So obviously, before the age of 2.5, you're learning language, you're learning how the world works, and that's critical to your development, critical for your brain. But what you can't do is remember what you did. So you can't remember what your crib looked like, you can't remember being born, you can't remember or getting ice cream at the age of 1.5.
Because your brain just is not developed enough?
Your brain just isn't developed enough, exactly. And at that age, and later on as well, there's such growth and pruning. So there's simultaneously a huge explosion of neurons, of brain cells that are happening in your brain, but there's also ones that are getting cut. So you're getting rid of it to make it more efficient overall.
You're the perfect person to ask this to, because I've often wondered it myself over the years. I had my tonsils taken out when I was 2.5 years old. I think I still remember the sight of the mask coming towards my face to knock me out, because that's what you did back in those days, to have this surgery performed. But I'm not sure if I really remember that firsthand, or if I've just heard the story so many times, that's why it's in my head.
Or you've assumed that that's how it must have happened.
Right. Can you help me on, but you said 2.5.
2.5.
So it's possible.
That is
I was 2.5.
It's a lower boundary. So, I mean, there's some disagreement as to what that age actually is. 2.5 is the lowest that I could find any evidence for. So nobody says that you can have them before. Some people say 3, 3.5, 4, up to 5. So it's not impossible that this memory is true.
But I can see the doubt written all over your face.
I'd just be very skeptical of anything before the age of 5.
I'm very hurt. Why do some people recall things as sort of still black and white pictures, and other people recall things as colorful movies?
Because brains work differently, and the way you picture things works differently. There's no sort of fundamental memory process there that I know of.
Do you know why some people have excellent memories and other people can't remember a damn thing?
Well, one reason is because people pay attention to stuff. So what you're going to remember is stuff that interests you and stuff you pay attention to. And then ideally stuff that you either repeat or try to make a big memory trace for. So you're trying to really engage with the material. And those are the best predictors of things that you're going to remember. And so people often ask me, like, "Oh, but there's individual differences, but some people are just really good at remembering," and they are. But at least some of that has to do with their cognitive strategy. So if you're really interested in names, pay attention when someone says their name and engage with that and make a rhyme or do something with it. Don't look at what they're wearing and look at what they're seeing. Don't try to do everything at once, because what you can't do is multitask. And you can't divide your attention.
That's very interesting, because not that everything you said before this is not interesting, but I've often wondered, Ted Williams hit 521 home runs for the Red Sox in his life. David Ortiz batted .688 in the 2013 World Series. Reggie Jackson batted .450 in the '78 World Series. Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs. There are numbers and stuff that is in my head forever, and I'm, unless something bad happens. I could not tell you the last 5 movies I saw or the titles of the last 5 books I read. They're gone. I can't remember them. Why?
Because you either didn't pay attention to them. So often when we read books or watch movies, we're just going with it. So it's almost a bit of a passive process. And you probably can tell me the gist of what happened.
I can tell you stuff in the movies.
Exactly.
And I can certainly tell you stuff in the books.
Exactly.
I read them.
So that's called gist memory. And that's different from something called verbatim memory, where you remember the exact, so a quote.
But I have verbatim memory. I have verbatim memory on sports stats.
Right. But what I'm saying is that you don't need to have both. So there's separate processes that are actually stored separately in the brain. And so you can have one or the other, or you can, best case scenario, have both of them.
That's what I got to work on. Best case scenario.
Best case scenario.
Dr. Shaw, let's turn to the future. A biomedical engineer at the University of Southern California is testing a memory-boosting implant. What could this do?
So the implant is sometimes referred to as a hippocampal implant because it's put into what's called the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that's responsible for turning short-term memories, which are really short-term. So I talk about this in the book as well, that sort of super short-term memories. So short-term memories are often also referred to as working memories, and they're about 30 seconds. So pretty much everything else needs to be converted into a long-term memory, needs to be passed through the hippocampus and put somewhere longer. Somewhere more permanent, essentially. And for the hippocampal implants, what they're trying to do is to improve that process of setting things into long-term memory. Now, at this point, research has only been done in animals, and there is some promise that maybe these prosthetic memory aids might help with that process of turning short-term memories into long-term memories. But that's particularly the case, or the intended case is for diseased brains. So when you're missing pieces of the hippocampus or your hippocampus is malfunctioning, then maybe you could recover some of that function by putting in a chip or a synthetic, well, brain piece.
Something. They've done it to animals and apparently Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because this is from I think probably a lot of people have seen this. This is 1990. Total Recall with the former governor, plays a construction worker in the year 2084, dreams of visiting colonized Mars. And we're going to show a clip where he goes to a company that plants false memories into people's brains so he can experience the thrill of having gone to Mars, even though he's never gone to Mars. Sheldon, let's roll it.
Mars it is. Now let me see. The basic Mars package will run you 899 credits. Now that's for 2 full weeks of memories, complete in every detail. If you want a longer trip, that'll cost you a little more because it's a deeper implant.
What's in the 2-week package?
Well, first of all, Doug, let me tell you, when you go recall, you get nothing but first-class memories. Private cabin on the shuttle, deluxe suite at the Hilton, plus all the major sites, Mount Pyramid, the Grand Canals, and of course, Venusville.
Yeah, but how real does it seem?
As real as any memory in your head.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
No, I'm telling you, Doug, your brain will not know the difference. And that's guaranteed, or your money back.
How likely is that future?
It's not totally wrong. I mean, that's essentially what I do in my research. So I implant complex false memories where you think entire experiences happened that didn't. And so do other scientists. There are a few of us doing this kind of complex autobiographical false memory research. So it's possible that we will be able to, and we can already, implant false memories of events. Whether or not we can implant 2 weeks or extended periods of time or an entire childhood, maybe, not impossible.
I don't hear you saying this is crazy.
Unlikely. It's not totally crazy. It's not totally crazy. It's just a bit more dramatic than, and longer and bigger than we typically can do.
Let's not say 2 weeks on Mars. Let's say I've never read your book, but you're going to. Could you implant the memory of that book in my head somewhere?
Yes.
You can do that?
Yes, definitely.
You can do that right now?
Remember that time? Yeah, so again, something we do all the time when it's suggested to us, remember when you were with me at, or remember that time we did that thing, or I'm sure you've read this thing or seen this thing, and you've heard so much about something that you start to go, oh, actually, maybe I did
read that.
Exactly. And then the next time you recall it, or someone brings up the book, you go, oh yeah, I read that, because you know the gist, you know the general things that it's about, and you can sort of contribute to the conversation.
That's a bit scary, actually.
Yeah, but
That we're
again,
that susceptible to this kind of thing.
we're all susceptible to this, yeah.
What percentage of people can't remember their spouse's cell phone number?
This day and age, probably most, because they're stored in our phones, so we don't have to. So memory is also, our brains, just like our bodies, are generally optimized. So you use as little energy as possible to do as much as possible. And if your brain doesn't have to remember something, if it doesn't have to store a phone number, it's not going to. And so your cell phone or your computer or even something you write down a number in is going to act as sort of an external brain. And your brain goes, oh, don't need that, can focus on other things and dedicate my energy elsewhere.
I can recall probably 30 years ago somebody coming on Johnny Carson's then Tonight Show, and he met every single person in the studio audience, which was probably about 200 people before the program began. And then when he came on for his guest shot, he said, "Here we go." And he literally told every single person in the audience to get up, and he named them all by name.
Wow.
And he had, what, half an hour before the program to memorize all of those names.
Yeah.
How do we, how can you...
How do we do that?
How do we do that? Exactly.
I want that.
I want to know how to do that. Can you give me a tip on how anybody can do that?
I can give you, so I'm usually the person who gives you the existential crisis, gives you lots of questions and makes you question reality, rather than here's a bunch of solutions.
Yes.
But really, by understanding how memory is a network, you can also use that to your advantage. And so the book also ends with sort of some tips in terms of make big memory traces, try to utilize this flexibility and the knowledge that all the different parts of your brain are, or lots of different parts of your brain are engaged when you make a memory. And then when you want to access those, you can poke back into those different corners. So if you want to remember everyone's name, which is a difficult task.
And useful. It's a good skill to have.
Useful. The question also with him would be whether he could still remember it the next day. But that's another
That's
question.
a great point. Incidentally, he got every single one right. He got every single one correct.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And in that kind of situation, so there's something called the Memory Olympics. And in the Memory Olympics, people have to remember vast quantities of information. So like 2 decks of cards or remember lots of numbers. And there's mnemonics, they're called, so memory techniques or techniques to help you remember that are applied. And when you ask these people what they do, one of the things that they often do is they make exceptional or weird associations between the things they need to remember and things they already know. So let's say you want to remember Ed. Maybe you know someone else called Ed, or you picture the person with 2 giant letters on his head that spell Ed.
Or I think he's a horse.
Or you think he's a horse, exactly. Or and then you want to remember Steve, and you pick something about that person that's exceptional, and you attach a visual memory, so you picture something on that person or with that person or that person doing something that's exceptional. And then when you go back, what you're accessing is that picture of, oh, he's got big letters, oh yeah, Ed, or he looked like a horse. And so that's what you're doing, is you're using things you already know, and you're connecting this new piece of information into a vast memory database you already have.
Got it. Let's finish up on this. As we are moving into the future and relying on all kinds of memory prosthetics, are we going to be more prone in that future to memory illusions about what really did happen and what didn't happen?
Well, for one, the whole reliance on memory prosthetics is a big hypothetical, a big question mark. Same thing with sort of manipulating our memories directly by going into the brain in general is a big question mark right now. But with regards to the vulnerability to false memories, I think that often it seems enhancing memories does nothing to protect you from forming false memories. And again, you want to keep that creativity, that flexibility, that ability to problem solve and learn and renew information in the brain. So if you destroyed that, you wouldn't be human. And so you don't want to not be able to have false memories.
Tina, should I ask her? Should I test her memory?
Uh-oh.
Should we do it? How many home runs did Ted Williams hit in his career?
Oh.
See? You don't know because you don't care. I told you, but you don't care, so you don't remember. I care. I remember.
You care, you remember.
521. The memory illusion, why you might not be who you think you are. Dr. Julia Shaw, thanks so much for coming into TVO tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.